March has finally rolled around, so it's time for horror movie March Madness number 2, baby. The sequel, Electric Boogaloo, whatever you want to call it. Last year, I believe I did all 60 whatever entries into the tournament. To make it a little bit shorter and a little bit easier on me, we're going to do 32, a nice even number, a nice even tournament number. So let's start this tournament and see which horror movie comes out on top and becomes March Madness champion. Starting off with Evil Dead Rise going against Terrifier. The seeds are randomized, so we're just going to get some crazy ass matchups, I do believe. So we got Evil Dead Rise, Terrifier 2. Terrifier 2, decent sequel. I like it a little bit more than Terrifier 1, I think. Evil Dead Rise, also another good sequel in its franchise, and I really loved it. It's not perfect by any means, but I did really, really enjoy it. Terrifier 2 I thought was fine, but it just felt a bit too long. I've said this numerous times. You don't need to make Art the Clown like doing mayhem. You don't need to make that a 2-hour thing. Like, that could be easy 1 hour and 20 minutes of just fun violence, but with some story in there. That's kind of what the first movie was lacking, and they kind of did better on some parts, but they also flopped in some other departments. It's still okay, and it's watchable. Our first match, I'm giving it to Evil Dead Rise. Moving on to Puppet Master versus Bride of Chucky. Now, both of these movies are kind of silly in their own way, but one is a bit more sillier than the other, and overall just kind of better, and it's definitely Bride of Chucky. Puppet Master is fine, but my major note is that it needs more puppets. There are puppet shenanigans, but there's also too much human things going on. I want to see the puppets being crazy. There is some of that, but I want a little bit more. Bride of Chucky, it just, you get everything you need. You got Chucky, you got Tiffany. So I'm choosing Bride of Chucky to move on to round number 2. Next up is Bad Milo against Escape Room. Now, Escape Room is probably a better movie, but I had way more fun with Bad Milo. However, Escape Room is still very fun, and I love all the set designs mainly, and the characters are cool too, but something about Bad Milo has that charm to it, man. I think anybody would probably side with Escape Room, and I think it probably is the better movie, but I don't know, man. Bad Milo, I really dig the ass alien creature thing. It's so stupid, but it does work. At least for me, it works. Probably not for some other people. You know what? Just because it stuck with me a bit more, I'm gonna give it to Bad Milo, I think. Now we have The Bay versus Black Swan. I watched Black Swan fairly recently, but The Bay, I watched a couple years ago. Both of these movies are very well made, and they're both very different movies. One's like a drama thriller. The other one is like a mockumentary found footage type of movie with like these parasites and like this bacteria disease thing that's really screwing up a 4th of July party or something like that. Black Swan's a very good movie, and I love the cast, I love the characters. The Bay, not really too focused on the characters, more of just like what's all going on. But this is one of the few horror movies that I've watched and I have felt like genuine, like, I guess like a panic inside of me. Like, it feels so real. I haven't seen it in a couple of years, but I watched it twice in 1 week, and each time I watched it, I was like, oh my god, this could have happened. This looks like it actually could have happened, and I think I'm going to give it to The Bay. If Black Swan was up against any other movie, I think it would have had a solid chance of moving on, but The Bay is just a real heavy hitter, and it could destroy some of these later rounds. So I'm going with The Bay, moving on to round 2. Next up, we got Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey, oh god, going up against Grave Encounters. Now, I threw a few kind of trashy ones in there just to give the tournament some more flavor, I guess. And Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey is definitely one of those trashy movies. We got Grave Encounters going against it. Grave Encounters, while not one of my favorites, recently I watched it again, and it's kind of fun. I love the characters. I love the parody of like the ghost hunting, ghost hunter, ghost adventurer shows. Our lead character does a great job of like presenting himself as like this funny host of the show. He's like, guys, I don't know what the spirit's gonna do, but trust me, we are gonna find out. Like, he is just the perfect, like, bullshit host, and the parody works so well. It also has a few genuinely, like, decent scares in there, so without a shadow of a doubt, I'm giving it to Grave Encounters. Maybe next year the cinematic Pooniverse will give us some heavy-hitting movies that we could throw in another March Madness, who knows. But we're moving on to Paranormal Activity, facing off against Cabin Fever. Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the Paranormal Activity franchise. I've seen 2 or 3 movies and they're alright, but the first one is pretty good. It's not one of my personal favorites, but I will admit it is an iconic horror movie. Cabin Fever is also somewhat iconic in the horror genre, maybe on a more campier level. Cabin Fever I definitely had more fun with, just some of the characters are a bit annoying. And as soon as I jumped to this match, I thought Cabin Fever over Paranormal Activity, but the more I'm thinking about it, For this tournament, I think, although Cabin Fever, I think personally I like it more, I think Paranormal Activity does deserve to beat out Cabin Fever. I think there's a lot of creepy moments, although I'm not the biggest fan of the franchise and movies like it, like I was saying. I do think it is the strongest of that genre of horror, so I am in fact gonna give it to Paranormal Activity. Next up is Saw X Against the Suckling, and I am so devastated that the Suckling was randomly put up against Saw X. I would have loved to see the Suckling move on. It is just low budget, campy, beautiful. Like, it's a hidden gem. It's so good and it's so bad at the same time. And I would have loved for it to at least make it to a round 2 or even round 3. But it's going up against Saw X, one of the better Saw movies in the whole entire franchise, in my opinion. Though I would have loved the Suckling to move on. It's very, very obvious that Saw X definitely deserves to move on to round 2 over the Suckling by a huge amount. But I still gotta show some love for the Suckling. But Saw X is moving on to round 2 for sure. Now we have Critters versus the Strangers. I had Strangers Prey at Night on the last March Madness tournament, and I don't know how far it went, depending on what it was put up against. The Strangers I actually watched for the first time in like 10 years a few weeks ago, and I forgot how, like, kind of creepy and intense some moments are. Like, I remember there being some suspenseful moments, like the man in the mask walking around the background. That's like an iconic shot right there. But watching it back, dude, I was like, damn, there are a lot of moments where I'm like, oh shit, something's happening. Something's about to happen, oh god. Although I would pick Prey at Night over the first Strangers pretty much any day of the week, it is still kind of close though. Critters is a nice little horror movie. It's not one of my favorites, but it's nice. You know, it's okay. I'd say, Strangers is definitely more quality, but the Critters might be a little bit more fun. But the tone that the Strangers go for, it works so well. It's such a great home invasion movie, and home invasion movies I've come to realize are probably one of my favorite genres in horror. I don't know why, maybe because there's a chance that it could happen. It's not very likely, but it's still kind of realistic. So I'm gonna give it to The Strangers. Moving down to the Blair Witch Project up against Final Destination 3. This seems like it's going to be a bit of a tough one. I love both movies. Blair Witch Project is probably the best found footage horror movie. I mean, I think I like Cloverfield like a bit more, but regardless, one of the best found footage movies. Final Destination 3, my favorite Final Destination movie in the franchise. It's very strong, has some of the like most creative like deaths and some of my favorite moments, like the tanning bed scene, cutting to the double funeral, casket, coffin thing, whatever. Beautiful stuff right there. That's so silly. The nail gun death as well. One of my like favorite kills in a horror movie. And while I think Blair Witch Project has a bit more charm to it in a way, it is kind of a slow movie, We got a documentary film crew, like a group of 3 people, I believe, walk into the woods, and it's like, all right, and then, slowly things start going a little nuts. But Final Destination 3, almost all the Final Destination movies, there's always stuff happening. It's like rapid fire. Yo, death is coming for us. What are we going to do, guys? We got to make a plan, guys. And Final Destination 3 being my favorite one from the franchise, I'm giving it to Final Destination 3. Like I said for Black Swan, any other movie going up against Blair Witch Project, there was a good shot it could have moved on to round 2, but gotta give it to Final Destination 3. Now we have a bit of an interesting one. We have Five Nights at Freddy's against 28 Days Later. Now, I feel like a huge majority of horror fans, depending on what you like obviously, but I think the majority would probably lean towards 28 Days Later. One of the better zombie movies. There are a lot of zombie movies and horror, and 28 Days Later, definitely one of the better ones. And while I will agree, yeah, it is a really good zombie movie, Five Nights at Freddy's it's just so much fun. It's not the best movie. 28 Days Later is the better movie, I will say without even hesitating. But Five Nights at Freddy's is more fun. The practical effects, the giant puppets and animatronics are so cool. Although the story is a bit lackluster, you could tell they put a lot of love and care into it to please the fans. And I'm not a big Five Nights at Freddy's fan, but I felt like I got what I needed out of the movie, and it was just so much fun. But I'm giving it to Five Nights at Freddy's for sure. The rewatchability is crazy. I watched it like 3 times within the span of like 1 or 2 months. I could watch it again and again, even though it's not that great. But yeah, Five Nights at Freddy's, it kicks ass. Now moving on to Scream 6 against The Boogeyman, 2 2023 movies. Scream 6, a lot of fun. One of my favorite Scream movies. The Boogeyman, I skipped over it. Thought it was going to be like cheap little jump scares here and there, and I wouldn't really care about it. But I watched it a few weeks ago, and holy crap, I like this way more than I thought I would. I think I actually kind of love it. We actually get to see the creature, the boogeyman, in there. It looks pretty freaky, especially when it's hiding in the shadows, but you can catch little tiny glimpses of it. There are some pretty decent scares in there. And although I'm giving Boogeyman all that praise, Scream 6 was just so fun. Scream 5 was very, very solid, but I think Scream 6 kind of amped it up a notch, giving us more like action and more chases going down. The Gale Weathers like apartment fight with Ghostface, really cool. I love how Gale puts up a genuine fight, even hangs up on Ghostface, which I don't know how many times that's happened. If Scream 6 was one of the weaker movies in the franchise, I could definitely see the Boogeyman going over it, but I really, really enjoyed Scream 6. So there it goes, moving on to round 2. However, I gotta give praise to the Boogeyman. Really enjoyed it. If you haven't seen it, it is definitely worth a watch. Alright, now this is going to be another tough one. We have Talk to Me going up against The Menu. I love both of these movies. However, one of them I've seen like 4 or 5 times. I consider it my comfort movie. Just everything is so chill about it, and if you've seen both movies, you kind of know which one I'm talking about, because I don't think Talk to Me is very chill. Talk to Me is a very, very strong horror movie, probably one of the best to have come out last year. The Menu, I love The Menu. Characters are great. Chef Slowick, Anya Taylor-Joy, Nicholas Hoult, John Leguizamo, everyone is just, all the characters are so great in this. And the same can be said for Talk to Me, although there's really only like one main star of the show. But regardless, both of these movies are very, very strong. Talk to Me has more, I guess it delivers more on the scares, but The Menu just creates like a crazy atmosphere of like just slow impending doom for everybody at this restaurant. Both of them deserve to go on to round 2, but I gotta give it to The Menu. Slender Man versus Get Out. I was talking about I threw some crap in there to give it a little bit more flavor, and oh boy, is Slender Man a whole load of crap. It is probably one of the worst horror movies I've seen. It's very funny that they gave it seed number 3, but I'm definitely giving it to Get Out. No competition. Get Out, fun characters, great story. The last 30 minutes or so is probably one of my favorite like endings to a horror movie, so I'm giving it to Get Out 100%. It's been a while since I've seen it, but I don't gotta reach far back in my memory to remember that Slender Man wasn't very good. Now we have Orphan First Kill versus No One Will Save You. Orphan First Kill. I like it better than the first Orphan movie. The twist in this one hits harder. Just everything from the twist onward is so much fun, and it gets hella chaotic. I love it. But No One Will Save You. It came out last year. I heard nothing about it until I went on Letterboxd and saw some like good reviews for it. I'm like, oh, people are kind of hyping this little movie up. Okay. No One Will Save You is an alien invasion type movie. Caitlin Dever is the star of the movie, and I am a big fan of her work. I watched tons of Last Man Standing back when it was on TV or whatever, and I believe her character was Eve Baxter. Loved her on that show. She kills it in this. Not a lot of dialogue. She's like a very, I guess, like shy or like closed in person. It had me so worried for our main character, and there's even a couple of like alien chase scenes that are just done so well. I really thought Orphan First Kill was going to make it far. I thought it was going to be a killer because the last half of the movie just kicks a bunch of ass, but No One Will Save You. The days that go by after I've watched it, I just keep thinking about it, and I love it more and more each time I think about it. So maybe it is a bit recency biased, but I think I'm gonna give it to No One Will Save You. Now, I thought some of the other matches were tough, but damn, this one I think so far has been the toughest. Now on to The Hunt against Renfield. Both movies are very fun. Renfield has Nicolas Cage as Dracula, also Nicholas Holt's back, he was in The Menu. Renfield is a bunch of fun. The Hunt is also a bunch of fun. While it is more on like the political side of things, and I'm not, too into politics or anything like that, it still was a blast. Love our lead character kicking ass. She is probably one of the most badass females I've seen in at least recent horror movies. There's been a lot of them, but she comes to mind immediately. I will say, though, The Hunt is pretty much, like, a very solid movie, like, throughout. Like, there's not really any, like, lulls to it, just, like, the political stuff, but that's just the whole theme, so it kind of brings it down a little bit. But once, I'm in the zone of, like, alright, this is what we're going to be dealing with, cool, whatever. Renfield kind of goes back and forth. The action is really great, but then, like, the Aquafina cop stuff is fine, but I'm not the biggest fan of it. I think Renfield is definitely more fun, but The Hunt is more consistent throughout, so I'm going to give it to The Hunt. And in the final match of round 1, we have Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark going up against The Night House. I feel like a lot of people are really mid on Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark. I think they're kind of like in the middle, like they don't really care for it, but they wouldn't say it's bad. The more I've watched it several times because it comes on TV or Pluto TV just randomly, and I sit through it and watch it, and I've liked it more and more each time it's on. But The Night House, I've only seen it a couple times, but ooh, what a heavy hitter The Night House is. It quickly became one of my favorite horror movies, I believe. The Night House has just such a strong story to it. Every little piece comes together so perfectly for The Night House. Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark is a very fun, like, I guess more kid level horror movie. Although I will say the Who Took My Big Toe scene and that like creepy lady, I've seen this movie like 3 or 4 times. Every time that scene is on, I get chills regardless, and I don't know why, but I'm giving it to The Night House. So there you have it, moving all the way back up. We're starting round 2 off with Evil Dead Rise against Bride of Chucky. Both movies are a lot of fun. Bride of Chucky definitely leans more on the comedy side. Evil Dead Rise has a lot more violence and creepiness to it. I've seen Evil Dead Rise a few more times since I first watched it last year, so if you would have asked me like 4 months ago, I probably would have went with Bride of Chucky, but I think I'm gonna give it to Evil Dead Rise. I've praised Alyssa Sutherland's performance as Ellie numerous times, and I will continue to do so. Yeah, Evil Dead Rise kicks so much ass. And now we have Bad Milo against the Bay. Bad Milo nearly didn't beat Escape Room, and it definitely isn't beating the Bay. Bad Milo is way more of a good time, but the Bay is just, it's shot so well and so like unique. I can't recall many horror movies that have been in like the mockumentary style. Like there's found footage, but this just kind of hits a bit different and gave me a whole different feeling I didn't know I was capable of having when it came to watching horror movies. So the Bay kicks ass as well as Evil Dead Rise. That's going to be a tough one. But moving down to Grave Encounters against Paranormal Activity. Both have to do with ghosts and spirits and stuff. Both are probably some of the scarier movies on this list. I will say Paranormal Activity, the ending really got me as a kid. It is still in my mind when I think about like the most scared I've been watching a horror movie. That last like 5 minutes of Paranormal Activity, oh my god, like way to go. I don't care for your movies that much, but you got me good with that one. But Grave Encounters also has quite a few scares in it. I was a bit older when I watched it, so it didn't get me as much. But I think Grave Encounters is more fun. Both of them are really good, like, spirit ghost movies. I feel like a lot more people would go with Paranormal Activity. It has a bit more quality while being low budget. Grave Encounters, I think, is just more fun. Also has a bit of, like, a little bit of silliness to it. But I love all the spirits and the scary moments that we do get. While not incredibly, like, horrifying, they're still kind of creative, and I do really enjoy them. I enjoy the scares a bit more in Grave Encounters, and I think it's just slightly the better movie, just ever so slightly. So it's moving on to round 3. Now we have Saw X against The Strangers. Saw X, I gave it praise for being one of the better Saw movies. The Strangers, I gave it more praise than like I would have a few months ago, because you know what? I forgot how intense some of the moments are. And while I think The Strangers is a bit more creative, I guess, because there's been 9 other Saw movies, The Strangers I think is one of the best home invasion movies. The Strangers is really creepy, but Saw X just has a lot more heart to it. I think I'm going to give it to Saw X. And now we have Final Destination 3 against Five Nights at Freddy's. Again, another tough one. If I want to have a fun time, I'll watch Five Nights at Freddy's, but Final Destination 3 is also a fun time, and it's actually a good Final Destination movie. There's only like a couple of them, like 1, 2, and 3 are pretty good. 4 and 5 are alright, but 3 is my favorite, like I've said. And Five Nights, as fun and as wholesome in a weird way as you are, like them building forts and shit, like that's fun as hell. Final Destination 3 kicks a whole lot of ass, so I'm giving it to Final Destination 3, I think. I knew Five Nights at Freddy's wasn't going to make it too far because it's not the greatest, but I think round 2 is nothing to frown at, so good job, Five Nights. Here we go, we got a tough one. We got Scream 6 going up against The Menu. The Menu, I really, really adore. Scream 6 has a bit more action and familiar faces, like we got Sam, Tara, the whole core 4, Mindy and Chad as well. Love those guys and gals. But The Menu, just as a one-time movie, seeing all those characters interact and all the character arcs we get to see throughout, just each table has its own thing going on, and it works so well. As a standalone movie, The Menu kicks ass. As a sequel, Scream 6 in a franchise, it also kicks ass. Although I love the Scream franchise, I think I'm going to give it to The Menu. I think it has a bit more quality to it. Scream 6 has the advantage of having familiar faces, but The Menu did such a great job from just starting from scratch. The Menu is moving on to round 3 over Scream 6. Really tough decision. Ask me tomorrow. I might say Scream 6. Who knows? Next up, we got Get Out against No One Will Save You. This, again, it might be a little recency bias, but No One Will Save You, the more I think about that movie, the more and more I'm like, damn, I really loved that, didn't I? And while Get Out has such a great story, and there's actual, like, dialogue in there, so we get to see, like, some characters, like, shift and change and talk, and you get to see what's going on. Also, it has Bradley Whitford in it. Love that guy. No One Will Save You just feels like a bit more unique in a way. I don't know. Get Out is also like a special movie, and it's really good. I think I'm gonna give it to No One Will Save You. There aren't a lot of horror movies that kind of made me feel like a little bit of panic watching our lead kind of get chased around by these aliens. I watched at 3 a.m. and usually I'm kind of dozing off through some of the movies I watch that late, but I was sitting on the edge of my bed. My eyes were glued to the TV screen. I was like, wow, this is pretty good. Maybe I need to watch Get Out again, I guess, but No One Will Save You, I think. Like I said, it could be recency bias. Ask me in a month and maybe I'd side with Get Out, but I think No One Will Save You is the right way to go for me. Finally, to finish off round 2, we have The Hunt against The Night House. The Hunt is more fun, a bit more action-packed, I guess, a lot of fights going down, but The Night House has a bit more, like, I guess, in the psychological department, if you want to think about it like that. I really enjoy both movies, but I feel like The Night House has more to it, more to think about, more to pay attention to, if that makes any sense. If you're hooked to The Night House, you'll love it. The Hunt, throw on in the background. Fun little time. I am giving it to The Night House. Moving on to round 3. So let's go back up. We have Evil Dead Rise against The Bay. Another tough one. The Bay kind of got to me. Evil Dead Rise is a whole lot of fun. I think the rewatchability for Evil Dead Rise is higher than The Bay. The Bay is like a one-time watch. You're like, hell yeah, that's a horror classic right there. Evil Dead Rise, I could throw it on any day of the week, and I'd be sitting there with a smile on my face. A lot of cool gore. A lot of like silly little moments, while also there being like just terrifying moments as well. The Bay might be like a more like well put together movie, I would say, but Evil Dead Rise I think takes the cake just a little bit. If I do watch The Bay again, it could pass Evil Dead Rise, but for now, I think I'm going to give it to Evil Dead Rise. Moving down to Grave Encounters against Saw X. Grave Encounters, I'm very surprised it made it to round 3, but it didn't have too much like competition. Like Winnie the Pooh wasn't going to make it far. Paranormal Activity, I didn't think it was going to beat Cabin Fever. But now Grave Encounters, I think this is where your train stops and it's time for you to get off, buddy. Go on your way. Saw X, way better movie, but you made it pretty far, Grave Encounters, so you know what? Good job. Now we have Final Destination 3 against The Menu. This is another tough one. There's a lot more going on in Final Destination 3, but I really, really love the characters, and I really love everything about The Menu. It's really hard to choose between these two. I think this is definitely a mood-based one. If I want to have some fun, I'll probably put on Final Destination 3. If I want to just relax and also have a little bit of fun, I'll probably put on The Menu. I don't think there's a lot of gore in The Menu. If I want to see some, like, I guess, violence, maybe Final Destination 3 is the way I would lean. But The Menu just has all of those qualities that I brought up for Final Destination 3 and The Menu. The Menu just has them all, just like kind of sprinkled in throughout the whole movie. It could be another case of ask me, on a different day, I might give you a different answer. But I think right now I can confidently say I'd put The Menu over Final Destination 3. And in our final match of round 3, before we get to the semifinals, we got No One Will Save You against The Night House. Now, like I was saying about No One Will Save You, let it sit in my brain a little more. I might put it above, but The Night House I've let sit in my brain for about a year now, and I've watched it a couple of times, and oh boy, it kicks so much ass. However, I do think ask me in a year, I really think my opinion could change. The Night House is moving on to the semifinals. Again, in a year, No One Will Save You might be super high up on my list, but right now, it's up there. But as of now, The Night House is still kind of near the top. Alright, here we go. We are at the semifinals. Here we go. Interesting first match of the semifinals. We have Best Lead Actress in Evil Dead Rise. And then we have Best Lead Actor, Saw X, Tobin Bell, Alyssa Sutherland. They both kick so much ass. I've said it a lot in this video. Both of these movies are really strong. Both performances by the actors I just spotlighted. Very strong as well. I don't think Tobin Bell carries Saw X. He's a big chunk of it, but the movie is just very solid. Evil Dead Rise, without Alyssa Sutherland, dude, I don't know what the fate of Evil Dead Rise would look like. But I don't have to think about either of those things because Alyssa Sutherland is there. I think Saw X overall might be the better movie. Evil Dead Rise, for me personally, kind of dips a tiny bit towards the end, but it's still really, really good. But I can think of a lot more memorable moments from Evil Dead Rise over Saw X. Saw X has quite a few, but Evil Dead Rise is such a really good time. Saw X, a part of me really wants to give it to Saw X actually, but I know deep down that I couldn't do it to Evil Dead Rise. I really think Evil Dead Rise is just so much fun. It's not as well put together as Saw X, like I said, but it is just a blast regardless. Evil Dead Rise is making it to the finals. We have The Menu against The Night House. The Menu is overall, it is such a nice little movie. I love it. The Night House is a bit more of a heavy hitter, I would say. We only really have one strong character in this, although the other characters are fine. Whereas The Menu is more of like an ensemble effort, I guess, if that makes sense. There are like several characters that make this movie what it is. The Night House, we mainly focused on Beth. We are in the semifinals, so of course I'm expecting this to be tough. I knew The Menu would go far, and I wasn't really even thinking about The Night House, but the more I remember about The Night House, I remember how much I really loved it. Plus, The Night House does have one of my favorite reveals in any horror movie. Nothing is after you. It's so good. That little connection alone right there boosts this movie up so much, on top of it already being a really good movie. As soon as I saw this matchup, I think I was like, yeah, The Menu's probably moving on. I think I've talked myself into giving it to The Night House, making it to the finals, facing off against Evil Dead Rise. So here we go, the finals, Horror Movie March Madness 2. We have Evil Dead Rise going up against The Night House. If any of my friends are watching, they kind of know which movie I would be leaning towards, but The Night House, I think overall, like I mentioned earlier, Evil Dead Rise falls off a little bit towards the end, but it is still very fun, very bloody, very gory, a nice little end. The Night House, just all the way through, slaps like a mother. And dude, I don't know what to tell you. Evil Dead Rise, more it chucked along to the finals, like, oh yeah, it's probably gonna win. But the more the Night House went to the finals, I'm like, oh my god, it's making it to the finals. Yeah, it is really good. I love Alyssa Sutherland's performance as Ellie. Love the blood, love the gore. Not a lot of gore or blood or really like too much action-y stuff going on in Night House. At least towards the end, we get a bit more crazy with it. I think the slow burn into the big reveal, into the just crazy movie the Night House kind of becomes, against Evil Dead Rise, which is just all throughout like fun, really creepy, but also really silly. Nice little balance there, like Evil Dead is known to do. With all that being said, ooh, it's really tough, but I think I know who is going to take home the crown in Horror Movie March Madness number 2. The winner of Horror Movie March Madness 2, Electric Boogaloo, is The Night House. Evil Dead Rise is a whole lot of fun, but The Night House is just overall a very nice movie. I'm not the biggest fan of slow burn horror movies. I kind of want like stuff happening immediately, but this, it works. It works for me. The Night House is great. Go watch The Night House. It's on something, probably. It's gotta be. I don't know. Rent it. I don't know. It's so good. And if you don't want to rent it or watch it, I guess you could watch my movie recap. Did I do all of this to just plug one of my videos? No. I just genuinely think The Night House is just a very, very solid horror movie. Evil Dead Rise is a lot of fun. A bit more fun than The Night House. But as a movie, The Night House checks almost every box. So thank you for watching. Horror Movie March Madness 2 Electric Boogaloo is in the books. The Night House takes home the W along with Scream. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned because I got a big kind of movie-related video coming out at the very end of March or very early April, so stay tuned for that. And I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.